Hi, and welcome to From the Shop Floor. I'm Adrienne Palmer, Editor-in-Chief of Big Picture Magazine. Today we'll learn from two PSPs on why you should consider soft signage. I have with me today Pam Richards, owner of Color Gamut Digital Imaging in Las Vegas, and a 2017 Big Picture Women in Wide Format Award winner, and Brian Hite with Image Options, and he is a Big Picture Editorial Advisory Board member. Hi, Brian and Pam. Thanks for joining me today.
Hello.
Hello.
So we'll start with a little bit of an introduction. Pam, we can start with you. Maybe just share how long you've been in the business, what your shop's known for, and how long you've been offering soft signage.
Hello, my name is Pam Richards, and I have been in business for 16 years, all in Las Vegas, obviously, since it's the business that we're in is geared towards conferences and conventions, and Las Vegas seemed to be the place to go. We have just recently built a new facility out in Henderson, which is a subdivision of Las Vegas area. And we have 55,000 square feet and had 90 employees until March.
Where are you now with employees? And I mean, your space hasn't changed, but.
Our space has not changed. We had to furlough quite a few employees, and they're still on furlough. We're hoping that we've seen a small increase in our type of business. So we're up to 22 employees now. We were down to 18, but as of December, we're up to 22. So 4 is a good sign. It's better than nothing.
For sure, yeah. I think 2021 will get everyone back working for you, and I think trade shows will be happening again. So, and I've been to the Henderson facility. It's beautiful and large. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Yeah. So what about you, Brian? A little bit about your shop and how long you've been offering soft signage.
Well, Image Options was started in June of 1999. My background's all trade show and exhibit related. So I spent 20 plus years in the exhibit industry prior to starting Image Options. We have 2 facilities, one in Southern California and one in San Jose, California. Had at one point about 160 employees. We're down, considerably due to COVID. Our business, like Pam's, is very much related to large gatherings, events, trade shows, exhibits. That represented about 60% of our business, 70% of our business. We're still, successful in the architectural side of things and the fabrication and POP side. Retail is another large section of our business, and that also has been impacted severely by COVID. But we're starting to see signs of recovery in that side of it as well. We, in March, began doing PPE, personal protective equipment, primarily focused on face shields, transaction shields, anything related to protecting, employees for hospitals and first responder type people. In August, we went to start servicing schools. So we developed some back to work programs and have been servicing many schools and putting up transaction shields for desks and things like that. So we're able to recover some of the lost revenue. But, in general, 2020 is not a fun time.
That's for sure. Yeah, well, I'm glad you've been able to find ways to pivot and new business. I imagine last year you were not considering those applications for your shop or even that type of business. Pam, I know we talked a little bit this summer and how you were really working with your team, it was a whole new process with sterilization and washing hands, things like that. Did you also offer PPE?
We did. As Image Options, we did the same thing. Unfortunately for Color Gamut, we must have missed the diversification program because we weren't diversified. There's a story about the fisherman who goes fishing and never takes a pole with him because he finds the spot and the fish just jump in the boat. Well, after COVID hit, the fish weren't biting anymore. So we went from working 24 hours, 7 days a week to working 5 days a week, 8 to 5. So, but we did offer, we had to learn a lesson. We've started an online shop on our website. We do offer all of the PPE. We have been servicing hospitals, both here and in Florida. I have a relative who's an RN in Florida, so they've been purchasing a lot of the same equipment. We're doing basically the same things that Image Options is doing, trying to find ways to help in any way that we can and get through this.
Sure. Yeah. I don't think there is any panel session that does not talk about COVID or 2020 yet this year. But let's get to some soft signage discussion. So,
All right.
Which are big parts of your business, and with trade shows coming back and events coming back, we'll be looking forward to a better 2021. But offering soft signage really has its fair share of benefits, including sustainability, shipping costs, ease of installation, removal, which Pam will show here in a little bit, which she has some soft signage behind her, some holiday themed, also ease of transportation. So let's talk a little bit about these benefits, specifically to your shop. Did any of those kind of jump out to you as like, yes, that's definitely a reason why you moved into soft signage? Brian, we can go to you.
Yes, we were in soft signage back when Image Options first started. So I think we began in 2000 with electrostatic transfers to fabric. So we had quite a few of the e-stat machines that we'd print paper and transfer to fabric. We did it as a differentiator from what was available in traditional vinyl banners and regular photographic type prints, both of which we also did. Over time, we've continued to remain in the fabric business. Each time a new technology would come out, we would evaluate that technology and add it to our offerings. And currently, we're running both direct and indirect dye sublimation all the way up to 5 meter. So it's been great for us. The weight savings, the shipping, being able to ship in a smaller package to reduce cost, the ease of handling, all contribute to the desirability of fabric in that industry of the events and environments.
Sure. Pam, what about you?
We didn't get into the soft signage part of the business until much later, where Brian has been in it since inception, where we did not get into the soft signage until 2000, I want to say 15. We're a little slower to catch on. I'm not quite sure that's the right wording, but it took us a while to figure out what was best for our industry. Obviously, speed. Everybody wants to be faster. So we looked at many different options. When we first started, printing direct was the way to go. Everybody thought that printing direct, even just in 10 foot, would eliminate a lot of time, but the quality wasn't there. So that didn't win over for us very well. So we picked both a 3-meter and a 5-meter back in 2015, thinking that that would help us get a leg up because we could be one of the very few into the 5-meter application. Unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of material at that time. I tried to think of everything, but sometimes we miss some spots. But it turned out to be very, very good for the trade show side of the business because of all the things that all the bullets that you hit, shipping costs, easy applications. You can do circular banners hanging over. There's so many different things that you could do with soft signage where you're limited when you're printing rigid.
Sure. And you both talked a little bit about the processes you're using, so direct, indirect. For someone who is just adding this onto their offerings or even just considering it, can you talk a little bit more about the technical side of those processes and what exactly you're printing with? Yeah, Pam.
Well, for me, I had to pick both options. We wanted to be in the 16-foot business, but 16-foot is print direct, where the 10-foot is a transfer process where you print to the paper and then you take it to the calendar and you sublimate it and transfer it to the fabric. You still have to transfer on a 16-foot, but it prints direct to the cloth. So probably like Brian's applications, we have both processes in place.
When I visited your Henderson shop, you printed the Best of Wide Format awards with a transfer printer. And if anyone was at ISA, oh wow, I guess almost 2 years ago, not this year, they were able to see those prints. And the reason that we made the trophies that way is because we knew that and the winners were able to just kind of bundle it up into their suitcase and bring it home. We didn't need to package these big trophies or anything like that. And so we immediately saw the benefit to soft signage in a unique way.
It's an excellent analogy. I mean, you couldn't hit it better.
Yeah. Brian, what about you and your processes? I know you said indirect.
Well, similar to Pam, all of our 10-foot product is printed to paper first and then transferred using a calendar, which is a large, think of it as a large heat press or a large iron. So you have a metal plate that goes on a felt belt and it causes the ink to sublimate into the fabric from the paper. When you're dealing with the 16-foot, there isn't transfer paper available in that width. So you give up a little bit of quality from a resolution perspective, not necessarily a color gamut. Sometimes direct to fabric gives you better color, just not the sharp detail that you can get using a transfer. So we print directly to the fabric, and as Pam said, it was difficult in the early days to get 16-foot wide fabric that was coated properly to accept the inks for transfer. Part of printing to the material is you want the ink to absorb into the material, but part of printing is you don't want the ink to absorb into the material. So there's that fine balance there, and it took a while to get that correct when you're dealing with the technical aspects of manufacturing fabric that wide and then applying the coatings and the weight of the coatings as it goes through the production process for the fabrics is pretty challenging for the manufacturers to do.
Yeah, Pam,
it is challenging. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say you're
challenging as well as waste. When you're printing to paper and transferring, there's not near the waste that you have where you're printing direct to the fabric. You have a lot of, the quality is good. It's much better than it was, by all means. Please don't get me wrong. But you do incur a lot of waste if it's not done correctly, especially in the backlit application.
Yeah, speaking of waste, Pam, I know that a lot of the excess material, you will donate that to, say, maybe a humane society or a shelter. Brian, are you doing anything like that too in terms of sustainability and donating that extra fabric?
Yes, several of the events that we're involved with consume thousands of square foot of product, whether it be fabric or vinyl or rigid substrates. And we've switched most of our substrates to a sustainable or recyclable type product. So one of the events that we do, we print, well over 1 million square feet of material for about 85% to close to 90% of that product that is delivered on show site has an end of life use after the show. So it's all collected, it's all distributed out to various groups. Some are homeless shelters for the vinyl banners. Some are companies that make bags and wallets and things out of the fabric. So it's very much part of the process to come up with a plan for end of life of these materials.
Sure, yeah. Pam, do you have anything to add to that about what Gamut's doing?
No, we're doing the same things. We're making pillows for the Western Division for the veterinarian societies, where they're doing a lot of training and testing. So we make the pillows for the cats and dogs. We do run into opposition with a lot of your kennels now, because there are so many precautions in place now. It wasn't an issue when it first started, but we're trying to get through some of those obstacles. They don't want, if you leave the dog unattended, will he choke? How do you prevent all this from happening? So there's a lot of areas that have turned us down since we first started, where when we first started, it was plentiful. And now we're having to get a little bit more creative as to how we recycle. Obviously, California is the leader in sustainability. They've been very good about that, and we're kind of a little slower at it, even though we're next door.
Yeah. So what are the top applications that your clients are asking for in your specific markets? Is it something similar to what you have behind you, a panel, Pam, or in trade shows? Is it some of the circular banners that you're talking about? What's the number one thing that we're asking for?
In our situation, it's SEG. We, as you can see from the frame behind me, it's just a 1 meter panel, and it's an easy application where they sew a beading onto it. We do have a lot of applications where they're doing away with vinyl and they're going to cloth, obviously for sustainability purposes, where we just put a pocket in it. But the pillowcases and the SEGs are our primary selling points.
What about you, Brian?
Very much similar, Pam. We do a lot of SEG, both for trade show and retail. A lot of the trade show work is tension structures. So we're producing a lot of fabric wrapped aluminum frames. And the scale of those, we've done some that have been, 600-700 feet long and 14-15 feet, in height. And if you look at the weight of the fabric on something like that, might be, if you're double layering it, 6,000 pounds. If you were to use another product like a vinyl product, you're probably looking at 15,000 pounds of product. And when you're talking about hanging that from a ceiling within a convention center, you can use fewer pick points, which saves the client money. The material is easier to handle. It's more compressible than vinyl. So I would say, predominantly, if you're in the event and exhibits, it's tension structures and SEG. If you're in retail, it's almost exclusively SEG, whether it's backlit or opaque.
Sure. And what's the most challenging application in terms of soft signage? Are there any jobs that you get that you're like, oh, this is going to be a project?
Yes, we've done quite a few of those where intricate shapes that will be used outdoors, for example, where you're trying to cover a structure that is very large in scale. So it might be, 40, 50 foot deep and a couple hundred feet long and 30 feet tall, with all these angles and shapes and applications that you have to have, where you have doorways and stuff like that. And just dealing with the logistics of, what is the wind load going to be on that? How much wind can it take in miles per hour before it shreds? What is the sail aspect of that fabric? Meaning, when the wind hits it, how much force is it exerting to lift that piece off the ground? So you then have to get into engineered calculations where you're determining the amount of weight that you have to have as part of the base. All of your hardware has to be of a certain, size and thickness to be able to support that. So you get into some pretty challenging projects on the outside. Inside, a little bit easier to deal with because you're not dealing with the wind aspect. You're strictly dealing with what does it take to hang this structure.
Sure, yeah, environmental effects. Pam, what about you?
Well, as I've touched before, the transfer printing for us is the easiest. The roll-to-roll printing onto textiles can become costly if not done correctly. Especially in the backlit applications where you finish the entire process, you put it up on the structure, you get illuminations, and you find there's variances in it. It could be in the material, it could have been in the print that you don't see. So it becomes very challenging when you're under a deadline and you're only given, a day, anywhere between 48 hours. Sorry, the lights just, when you sit still in my office long enough, all the lights go out. Okay, I guess we're over. Goodbye.
Well, Pam,
sorry about that.
A good opportunity for you. If you stand up, maybe the lights will come on. If you want to show us the ease of taking
Yeah, let's see if I can get my lights to come on. There we go. See? Okay. I hope they made this easy for me. They have tabs. The tabs are usually at the bottom so that they're not so noticeable. But they just pull the tab and it pulls right off. Folds down, fold it in half, take it away. The same with installation is the same. They've come up with some pretty innovative ways to do the installation where you can even take a card and install it with a card. Of course, I can't reach it. And I've just ruined this. So, but it's very easy to do. And the cards will just zip right across. If I can get this to do the right thing.
Ta-da.
Close. close. Never goes the way you want it to, no matter how many times you practice.
Yeah, next time you just
Very well done.
that's better. Yeah.
For me, it was pretty simple to do, and it's easy. You know, like I said before, you can just take a credit card, and just it helps a lot. You know, just to slide the credit card across, or you know, any type of card. What we have done since COVID is we have done a video where we have a QR code, and it goes in the box, and it shows you, you know, the correct way to hang versus the incorrect way, where you can eliminate the sagging. And the directions are printed on a card, so you can actually use the card. And we ship it with the product.
Oh, that's genius. I love that. Yeah, QR codes are really making a little bit of a comeback if you go to a restaurant and you can get your menu to pop up. So that's a really great way to showcase exactly how to do this. Yeah, I love that. Well, now that we're talking a little bit about SEG and the finishing process, are the frames something you just have in-house, or are you outsourcing those? You know, how is that when you're offering these to your clients? What's that process like? And either of you can answer.
We do not manufacture the frames here.
Okay.
We carry an inventory. There are several different types, whether they are the matrix or moss or just F-tracks. We try to carry the main ones here, and then if we need to get them, we get them out of a local person that's either in Vegas or in California. So it just takes a day to get. But any of the ones that we have to manufacture, we have to outsource that to get them for some of the abstract designs, you know, where they're not just straight or curved. We do carry the circulars here. We carry a 6 foot and 8 foot, just standards. And when someone wants something different, we can get it for them, but we do not fabricate here.
Okay. Brian, what about you?
We purchase raw extrusion as well as have it manufactured. We have a full metal shop, so we make most of our frames here, you know, within the facility. So any of the large structures, it's a combination of things, because not any single manufacturer of frame parts or products creates everything that you need to do some of the work that we have to do. So if it's simple rectangles, freestanding, like you'd see in a trade show or retail, very simple. We have all the saws and extrusions to do that. When it starts to get more complex, we're welding up pieces, we're manufacturing parts to get what we need to actually accomplish the client's vision. So.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm curious just what the majority of PSPs who are manufacturing in-house versus outsourcing, and that may be a question we can ask later on when we have some live questions in the Big Picture booth. Just curious what other people are doing. So any other tips on the finishing process, you know, once it's printed, anything that you may want to share with the audience that may be out of the ordinary for a different type of application used with wide format printing?
Well, I think Pam might agree with this, but the size of the pieces, when you're dealing with SEG graphics, the material, by the nature of it being fabric, has some give to it. So it stretches. If it's not installed properly and you have a very large piece, you can end up starting on one end and going to the other end with an inexperienced installer and end up with 6 inches of extra material on the other end. If they don't start on the corners and work their way in, that happens frequently, and you get the call from the show floor saying, hey, your graphic doesn't fit. No, it fits. Here's photos of it in the shop. Here's what you got to do. And you walk them through what they need to do that. If they're smaller pieces, it's pretty easy to do. But when you start getting into longer walls where they want it in one piece, that's when you start having challenges. But fortunately, most of the labor on the shows has become familiar enough with the product that you don't get as many of those calls as you used to.
Yeah, what's the percentage of your installers having to go install something versus you just, like Pam, shipping it to them and having a little QR code with a video to give instructions? Has it diminished over the years as people start to understand it a bit more?
I think it begins with if it's the first time it's been installed and you're mounting the frames, we would typically do that install. Refreshes are typically taken care of by the store personnel.
Makes sense.
So,
Pam, is it the same for you?
Well, we've put a lot of different ideas into place where now everything gets fitted before it goes out the door, and pictures get taken so that we know it does fit. We do get less calls than we ever got before since we've actually done that process. Soft signage can be in a variety of different finishing applications, whether it's cold or hot. Obviously, the cold application is the easiest versus, your hot knife cut to keep the fabrics from fraying. A lot of fabrics don't fray. But a very good sewing department always helps.
yes, it does.
They speak a different language than I'm sure I do and Brian does, but that's a department we kind of stay away from.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I'm just kind of going through some of my questions. Just curious if you have any final tips for print service providers who are looking to add soft signage. They're here at the ISA virtual event to obviously learn more, and you two are the experts from the shop floor. So any other tips, tricks, any other—
Don't give up.
Don't give up. I like that.
Don't give up. It's not an easy application. And there are more things involved rather than just buying a printer. You need to buy a printer, you need to buy a sublimator, you need to buy, cutting by hand becomes very difficult, so you need to buy cutting machines. You need to have a full sewing department that understands the application. So there are steps involved in each process. The thing that I feel like it's different than when we were first in the business and we printed rigid and roll to roll. You just put a piece of material in, it prints it, and we cut it, and it's gone. You need a printer and you need a cutter. In the soft signage part of the business, it is a learning curve. Brian touched on the temperature, humidity. Humidity is a big factor. And in Nevada, we have zero humidity. So we have humidifiers that are mounted on the walls of both our rigid and roll to roll as well as our soft signage side of the business, so that it keeps the dust down, it keeps the machines happy.
Yeah, that's really great feedback. I think it's definitely not just print, cut, and you're out the door. There are a lot more details to this. And I think the sewing group too, I mean, just having an entire sewing team and that in your finishing department, not everybody has that at their shop. So, and again, really taking into consideration your environment. Brian, what about you?
I would say similar to Pam. And, if you're going to get into the business, reach out to the manufacturers that you're considering based on the budget, but realizing that what you think you're going to spend, you're probably going to spend more, just because of those other aspects, finishing aspects, sewing aspects, trying to, fabric has a life of its own. So you're laying it out on the table to trim it, and it's difficult to get it to lay perfectly square on the table. So you trim it square and then you hold it up and it's not square. So, there's just a lot to it. So reaching out to the equipment manufacturers, number one, for cost of ownership of the equipment, resolution of the equipment, what the ink costs are, how it handles material, get them to demonstrate how it handles material, how the material's loaded, etc. The transfer process is probably one of the easier to train aspects of the process, but even that has its own set of criteria that make it difficult with temperature ranges. You've got to constantly monitor the temperatures on your presses because 385 degrees, the yellow is one color, but at 390 degrees, yellow is a different color. So the color management side of making sure that what you're putting on the fabric is accurate is another huge aspect of producing good quality graphics on that. And at the end of the day, you can be the best printer in the world with the best equipment in the world, but if you don't devote the resources to the finishing side of the business, that's where you're going to fail. So really focus on that part of it once you have the equipment side of it dialed in.
Yeah, are there any other resources? Obviously, working with your manufacturers is a great resource to have and something you need to do. But when you were starting this, both of you, was it a bit trial and error, or were you working with other PSPs in your area? Really, how did you figure out how all this worked?
Well, for me, since we did it very early on with the ESTAT process, you don't know what you don't know, and you gradually learn by making a lot of mistakes. One of the mistakes we made was purchasing some directive fabric printers at one point that were extremely productive. They were commercial equipment used in mills in Europe. What we didn't realize was nobody had any media for it here. You had to have special coatings on the fabrics to get it to run properly. And it took a long time to develop a line of fabrics. And that's where Pacific Coast Fabrics finally, started, because Mike Sanders worked with us to develop those fabrics for our machines. And so it's really, you've got to know all the parts. Do you have ink that works? Do you have fabric that works? Do you have stuff? It's like buying a car with no tires. It's not going to go anywhere. You got to make sure you have tires. So it's just really, doing what you can to get the manufacturer to give you the training for the operations side. Take some classes in color so you understand the color. Make sure you have the proper equipment for profiling the color. And then again, finishing. And there aren't a lot of resources for training how to sew. It's really, you've got to have somebody that's experienced as a mentor that's going to help train people to do that. Once they've picked up the basic operations, they can sew. But it's getting that basic equipment operation down first, and then going through and making sure your machines are set up. Fortunately, a lot of the sewing equipment now has computer controlled tension on the thread. tension on the fabric, tension on the beading that's being applied. So some of the things you had to do by feel more as an art form in the past has become mechanical in nature. So that's pretty much it. It's just make sure that you really dig into it and get your list together, and then ask somebody that knows, hey, do I have everything I need on this list, or do I have to add a few more things, or is anything on here I don't need?
Yeah,
So,
fantastic feedback. And don't be afraid to ask more questions and go to
yeah,
more.
everybody's out there. They're willing to help. There's a whole group of people that are willing to offer advice. Fabric manufacturers, they're motivated to help because they want to sell you media. So they will share whatever they can. Equipment manufacturers, the same thing. They want to sell you machines, so they're going to contribute. But you have to take everything with a grain of salt and say, why your machine and not their machine? I've looked at their machine, I really like it. What makes yours different? So,
Great points. Yeah, before we close, Pam, any other final thoughts after Brian got it all?
Way to go, Brian. You just took it all.
I'm sorry. Erase. Back it up.
No, excellent job. It's not an easy application to start, but never give up. It's worth a challenge. It really is, because there are so many benefits to the soft signage, as we've brought up in this webinar that we've just taken place in. And Brian has been in it a lot longer than I have. And so it's enlightening to know if they've been through those challenges. Not that we didn't have our own challenges, you know, with putting a swamp cooler in rather than humidifiers, you know, anything to save money. But you learn from your mistakes, and if you have a good team in place that's willing to drive you, the outcome is excellent.
Great advice. Yeah.
Well
Great.
said.
Yes. Well, thank you both, Brian and Pam. I know I've learned a lot. I'm sure our audience has too. For those watching, thank you for joining us. You can find more information on soft signage if you head to the Big Picture booth here in the virtual experience. And you can find Brian, Pam, if you want to share some social media channels for those watching to follow you.
I'm available on LinkedIn, so be reached that way, or email, phone.
Great. We'll share that. I'll share those in the Big Picture booth. Pam, same with you?
Same. We have a social media team here now that does the LinkedIn and the Twitter and all the social media aspects, and the same email, LinkedIn, any one of those. And we've been through these trying times. We're going to make it. We just have to make sure that everybody, whether it's soft signage or rigid, stays positive, because we're going to come out of this. Everybody is.
I agree. And I really look forward to seeing all of the soft signage you do in 2021. We'll be clamoring to cover it in Big Picture. So yeah, staying positive, and thank you all again.
Thank you
so much.
Thanks, Adrienne. Thanks, Pam.
Thank you. Thanks, Brian.